Death of an innocent child is something that you never forget. Just what he did to her was horrific.
In the stillness of a Florida night, the tranquility of an innocent home was shattered in an instant. This is the haunting story of Rebecca Kunash, a 6-year-old girl whose life was violently stolen away in a crime that still echoes in the memories of those who were forced to confront its brutality. On the morning of May 11, 1979, Becky was fast asleep in her bedroom in Merritt Island, Florida, while just a few rooms away, her parents were unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. What seemed like a peaceful night quickly descended into horror. A young U.S. Marine, just back from duty, slipped unnoticed into the home and committed an unthinkable act of violence. In a matter of minutes, Becky vanished from her bed, leaving only devastation behind. This wasn't a random act. It was calculated, cruel, and violent, a crime that would deeply affect not only the victim's family, but also the very detectives investigating the case. The brutality of the crime left officers forever haunted by the horrific images they witnessed, and the case would remain an open wound for many years to come. Join us as we take a deep dive into this heartbreaking story, unraveling the devastating events of that tragic morning, the relentless search for justice, and how those who were closest to the investigation could never truly escape its dark shadow. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to follow the full story as we uncover the heartbreaking details behind this unsolved tragedy. It was a typical spring morning in Merritt Island, Florida, a quiet town known for its peaceful neighborhoods and the sprawling beauty of the nearby coastline. On May 11, 1979, most families were just waking up to begin their day, unaware that one household would soon be shaken to its core. In the Kunash home, the day started like any other. Becky, only 6 years old, was sound asleep in her bed. She had spent the previous night playing with her toys, laughing with her family, and dreaming about the adventures she would have as the day unfolded. But as the clock ticked on, a dark shadow was lurking just outside her window, a presence that would change everything. The peaceful morning was interrupted when Becky's parents, still unaware of the danger that was closing in, went about their morning routines. There was no sign of trouble, no unusual sounds or signs of distress, just a regular morning in an ordinary home. But for one young Marine returning home from duty, this would be the perfect moment to strike. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. Becky had vanished. No cries for help, no disturbance that could have given a clue to her whereabouts. Only an empty bed and a growing sense of dread that would soon engulf the entire community. This quiet neighborhood, so full of life, was about to be changed forever by an event no one could have predicted. It wasn't until late morning that Becky's parents, Robert and Patricia Kunash, realized something was horribly wrong. By then, the entire house had begun to stir, but there was no sign of their daughter. Becky's absence wasn't immediately alarming. She had been known to wake early and sometimes wander around the house, but when her parents went to check on her, they found her room empty, the covers still neatly pulled up as if she had never even been there. It was a small detail, but enough to raise suspicion. The door to Becky's room was closed, but it wasn't locked. Her clothes were still in the same spot she had left them the night before. Robert called out for her, but there was no response. At first, he assumed she was simply playing somewhere in the house, hiding in a game of hide-and-seek. The house was relatively quiet, no sounds of Becky's laughter or her small feet running through the hallways, just an eerie stillness that slowly turned into an unmistakable feeling of dread. Patricia, still thinking Becky was perhaps playing outside, went to check the backyard. No sign of her there either. Panic began to creep in. Patricia started calling neighbors, asking if they'd seen the little girl, but there were no reports. One by one, the hours stretched on with no answers. Becky was nowhere to be found. Robert checked again and again through the house, turning over every corner, opening every closet. His heart raced faster with each passing minute. The feeling of helplessness in the air was palpable. Where could she be? Did she wander off into the neighborhood? Or was something far worse happening? It didn't make sense. At this point, they called the police, but they couldn't have known the true magnitude of the situation. Officers arrived shortly after, beginning a search of the house and surrounding areas. By then, the Kunash family had already moved into full-blown panic mode, but no one had any answers, and each passing moment made it clearer that something far more sinister had occurred. The police were quick to respond, arriving at the Kunash home shortly after the family's call for help. At first, they treated it like a typical missing child case, expecting that Becky might have wandered off, or perhaps gone to a nearby friend's house. After all, Merritt Island was a close-knit community where neighbors knew one another, and it was common for children to play freely in their yards. But as the hours ticked by and the search turned up no sign of Becky, the atmosphere at the Kunash home shifted from concern to deep unease. Detectives began to canvass the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking questions, and retracing the family's steps from the morning. Still, nothing. There were no sightings of Becky anywhere, not even a whisper of where she might have gone. At first, the search felt routine. The police coordinated with local volunteers to comb through the streets, the parks, and even nearby wooded areas. But as nightfall approached, it became clear that something wasn't adding up. The search expanded to include local businesses and public areas where children might gather. It felt like every inch of Merritt Island had been covered. Still, no answers. Officers grew increasingly frustrated. Where could she be? Then, the unthinkable happened. Late into the evening, a witness came forward with a disturbing report. A woman in the neighborhood said she had seen a young man walking through the area earlier in the morning, carrying something large wrapped in a blanket. He had been walking near the Kunash home but had turned away quickly when the woman tried to engage him. The description wasn't enough to put together any leads, but it planted a seed of doubt. Was someone involved in Becky's disappearance? And if so, who? As the night wore on and police realized the depth of the situation, they started looking into the possibility of foul play, a child abduction. But who could have done this, and why? The police began looking deeper into the people closest to Becky, family members, friends, and anyone who might have had access to the home. However, each of those leads turned up cold. No one had seen anything unusual. At this point, the case took an even darker turn. Detectives began considering the possibility that Becky had been taken, not just wandered off. But the mystery deepened. There was no ransom note, no demands, no clues, just the sudden disappearance of a little girl who had been loved by everyone in her community. The initial hours of the investigation felt like an eternity. The frustration was growing, the confusion mounting, and with each passing moment, it became clear. Someone knew more than they were saying. But who? Days turned into weeks, and still, there were no solid leads. The police were getting desperate. They had thoroughly investigated every angle, speaking to everyone in Becky's life, yet nothing pointed to the answer they were so desperately searching for. The town, once calm and idyllic, was now filled with a tension that could be felt in every corner. The Kunash family was consumed with grief and confusion, while the police, overwhelmed and under pressure, continued the search. But then, just when it seemed like the investigation might grind to a halt, something came to light that would turn the case on its head. On the morning of May 12, 1979, a devastating discovery was made. Becky's body was found floating in a canal near Merritt Island, a short distance from where she had been taken. The discovery was agonizing for the Kunash family, but for the investigators, it was also the turning point. Forensic evidence revealed the horrifying details of what had transpired. It wasn't just a simple abduction. Becky had suffered a brutal assault, one that left her with severe brain damage from an immediate skull fracture caused by a violent blow. For years, the case remained unsolved, and authorities were left grappling with the brutality of the crime and the lack of suspects. It wasn't until the DNA evidence surfaced in 1986 that investigators made a key breakthrough, which ultimately led them to Brian Jennings. However, what followed was even more horrifying. Brian Jennings, the man who had taken her, had not killed her outright. According to reports, despite the catastrophic damage to Becky's skull and brain, her heart remained faintly beating. Jennings carried her toward the canal, where he held her head underwater, forcing her to drown. Becky Kunash died from asphyxiation, the ultimate cause of her death being drowning. After taking her life, Jennings callously left Becky's lifeless body in the canal. It was an act so cold and calculated, it left investigators shaken and the community horrified. He fled the scene, returning to the house where he was staying. Minutes later, he was spotted by his aunt, Catherine, who saw him stumbling in a dazed state. He claimed he had been drinking heavily, though it would later become clear that the true reason for his confusion was far darker than he let on. It was clear to investigators now, Jennings was the one responsible for this tragic crime. The evidence had finally pointed directly to him. But even with this discovery, the case wasn't over. It had only just begun to unfold. The news of Becky's body being found in the canal spread like wildfire through Merritt Island. Residents, already fearful and confused, were gripped with a deep sense of horror. How could this happen in their town? The revelation that a local man was responsible for such a brutal crime only added to the community's anguish. The discovery of Becky's body painted a disturbing picture of the crime. The fact that she had been abducted, violently assaulted, and then drowned in a canal left the entire community grappling with the emotional weight of the tragedy. Parents locked their doors, unsure if their children were truly safe in their own homes. But the community's pain went beyond fear. It turned into frustration. And now, with the discovery of the body, everyone wanted answers. Jennings, a former Marine who had been staying with relatives in the area, became the focal point of the investigation. His actions and the evidence linking him to the crime were unmistakable, but the length of time it took to uncover the truth left many people disillusioned. As the case moved through the legal system, local media outlets began to report in full detail. Newspapers ran articles on the horrifying nature of the crime and updates on the investigation. The case soon caught the attention of national news outlets as well, and with the widespread coverage came public outrage. Many were demanding justice, hoping that this case would be solved once and for all. The pressure on law enforcement to bring the perpetrator to justice had reached its peak. And finally, Jennings was arrested and, in 1980, was found guilty of Rebecca's kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. His conviction was based on various forms of evidence, including fingerprints found on Rebecca's window and testimony from cellmates who claimed that Jennings had confessed to the crime. Despite being sentenced to death in 1980, Jennings spent years appealing his conviction, dragging the case through multiple rounds of legal battles. In 1989, just one day before his execution in the electric chair, a Florida Supreme Court stay temporarily halted the process. Jennings would remain on death row for more than 45 years, becoming one of the longest-serving death row inmates in Florida's history. He filed numerous appeals, delaying the inevitable.
And in this case, 3 separate juries said death was appropriate. 3 separate trial judges said death was appropriate.
Finally, in October 2025, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, signed a new death warrant, scheduling his execution for November 13, 2025.
To wait this long is not justice for Rebecca.
The long wait for justice finally came to an end on November 13, 2025. Brian Frederick Jennings was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison near Stark. At 66 years old, Jennings met his end after a legal battle that had lasted nearly 45 years. His execution took place following decades of legal challenges, with appeals and delays contributing to the extended wait for closure. When asked if he had any final words, Jennings kept his eyes closed throughout the process, responding simply with a single word: no. Sadly, Rebecca's parents had already passed away years earlier, never witnessing the execution of the man responsible for killing their daughter. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing that they wouldn't live to see the day Jennings would finally face justice. But here's where we want to hear from you. How do you feel about the lengthy gap between the crime and the eventual arrest? Do you think justice was truly served with the conviction of Brian Jennings? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts on the impact of such a long wait for closure. And as we continue to explore this case, stay tuned for the final chapters of this heartbreaking journey, because we've got much more to uncover. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. The case of Rebecca Kunash is not just a local tragedy. It's a story that highlights the devastating impact of violence on families and communities, and the long road to justice. Becky's death sent ripples through Merritt Island, and as the years went by, her story became a reminder of the fragility of innocence, the unpredictability of human cruelty, and the toll that a missing child case takes on everyone involved. For the Kunash family, the loss of their daughter was more than just an emotional wound. It was a life-altering tragedy that shattered their sense of security and peace. In the wake of Becky's death, her parents were forced to endure the pain of never knowing why their daughter was taken from them. They carried the weight of not just the loss, but the long years of uncertainty as they waited for answers. The devastating loss also left a deep emotional toll on her parents, Robert and Patricia Kunash, whose marriage ultimately couldn't withstand the grief, leading to their eventual divorce. But beyond the personal tragedy of the Kunash family, this case also left a mark on the broader community. Merritt Island, once a place where people could trust that their neighbors were safe, became a town forever changed. The fact that the killer had been someone who lived in their midst left people with a sense of betrayal. The realization that such a brutal crime could happen in a town like theirs was terrifying. The case also had a profound effect on law enforcement. Detectives and officers who worked on the case found themselves facing the harsh reality of unsolved crimes that lingered in their minds long after the case was put away. The emotional toll of investigating such a brutal crime, combined with the constant media pressure and public expectations, was a burden many officers struggled to shake off. In fact, some of the detectives who worked on the case later spoke about how the memory of Becky's tragic death haunted them for years, long after the case was resolved.
He's an evil, evil person, and that's why what happened happened.
From a broader perspective, the Rebecca Kunash case also brought attention to the limitations of forensic technology in the late 1970s and early 1980s. It was only through the application of new DNA testing methods years after the crime that law enforcement was finally able to close in on Brian Jennings as a suspect. The case revealed just how crucial advancements in forensic science are in solving crimes, and how much can be lost when the technology available doesn't allow investigators to link perpetrators to their crimes. After decades of legal delays, the execution of Brian Jennings in 2025 marked the final chapter in the tragic story of Rebecca Kunash. Despite the years of waiting, the brutal crime against an innocent child, and the devastating loss felt by her family, the execution was a long-awaited moment of justice for the Merritt Island community. The case serves as a reminder of the long road to justice for victims and families, and the challenges law enforcement faces in solving crimes that take decades to unravel. It also underscores the emotional and psychological toll it takes on the families, who sometimes wait a lifetime for closure. This case also reminds us of how fragile life can be, and how important it is to remain vigilant, to advocate for justice, and to never forget the victims of senseless violence. We may not always have the answers, but through stories like this, we can ensure that those who have suffered are not forgotten. If you found this story as impactful as we did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on more true crime stories. Share this video with your friends and family so they can see how justice was finally served, and continue the conversation about what can be done to prevent tragedies like this in the future. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think enough is being done to solve cases like Becky's? How can we, as a society, support those who are still waiting for justice? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.